So this is.
Hi, Sabrina. My name is Markeith. I'm helping host a meeting tonight. Could I get a sound and a visual check for you, please? Hi, Lance. My name is Markeith. I'm helping host a meeting tonight. Could I get a sound and a visual check for you?
Wait.
All right.
Hey,
Hi, can you hear me?
I
hear
can.
you.
Thank you both.
Okay, I was going to try to do all of this on one laptop, and you probably heard me having a conversation with myself on the other one. So I'm only going to use one.
Thank you so much. Hi, Philip. Could I get a quick sound check from you, please?
Hello, this is Phil.
All right. All good. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Parker.
how you doing?
Good. So just I think you saw that in the email, but Markeith is here with us tonight, and he'll be transitioning to the host role.
Okay. Listen, you've got an echo, by the way.
We probably have 2 microphones open over here, but I'll mute and let him take over.
Okay.
Hello, everyone.
Greetings.
Hi, Colleen. Could I get a quick visual check and a sound check from you?
Sure. How's it going?
Hello. Thank you so much.
Hello. Thank you.
Hi, Ty. Can I get a quick sound check from you?
Yes, sir.
All right. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Hi, young man.
You get asked to come in, all of a sudden the meeting kind of goes away, and you get this thing that says, you're being disappointed.
Hi, and can I get a quick sound check from you just to make sure your mic is working okay?
Yes, hi, good evening.
I can hear you as well.
Thank you.
Just same for you. I'm not sure if you said anything earlier, but just a quick sound check, if you don't mind.
Who, me?
Yes, and you sound good. Thank
And
you.
it works.
And I believe Lauren just came in as well. Could I get a quick visual and then sound check, please?
I did, and good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
She made a proof and we have, there's never text file, just kind of open and you can cut and paste from. And because at the beginning, you have to put, hey, if there's a reminder, this is a public meeting. Anything in the chat.
Michael, will you be able to read us into closed session, please? Thank you. Do I sound too loud to folks? I was told I was too loud last night. Okay. All right. I don't want to be too loud. At the point, no yelling at anybody.
Dial it down there.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody.
Hello, Alan. How are you?
Doing well. How are y'all doing?
Good. Nice day outside.
Oh,
Yes, very nice.
splendid.
Do you have a baby you can show us this time?
Hope you're asking Alan, not me.
I am talking about Alan, yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Baby right now is preoccupied with books, so.
It was a lot to ask, I'll admit.
Just a friendly reminder to council that we do have a closed session after this work session tonight. All right, it's 6:30. Are we ready to get started? Okay. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the October 20th work session of the Chapel Hill Town Council. We're pleased to have you here with us, however you are joining us, and this will be recorded so people can watch it later if they are interested in doing so. We do love public participation, but work sessions are usually reserved for council to have a discussion. And then if there's time at the end of the work session, we will take some public comments and we can see how that works out. And you could do the raise the hand function. But we do like hearing from you. There are other ways to communicate with us as well. Emails, phone calls, those kinds of things. So thank you very much for joining us this evening. Tonight, we're going to have an update on our community splash pad and the Lower Booker Creek Stormwater Working Group, plus a review of the town's existing stormwater ordinances. And then council will have a closed session after this meeting. In keeping with our virtual rules for virtual meetings, I need to do a roll call, please. So if you'll unmute yourself and count yourself present when I call your name, that would be great. Mayor Pro Tem Parker.
Here.
Councilmember Anderson.
Here.
Councilmember Weinstein.
Here.
Councilmember Gu.
Here.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Here.
Councilmember Ryan. Councilmember Stegman.
Here.
And the mayor is also here. Thank you. And usually in council at work sessions, we'll go by first name, so we'll make it a little easier on people. I do have a couple of announcements for you all this evening. One is I want to let the council know that a petition, and I'm helping chair this petition from the Downtown Partnership. I'll be bringing it forward next week since we don't vote on petitions at work sessions, but I wanted to give you a heads up. We're trying to get it in the packet for Friday, but this is a petition to have our staff investigate our town taking back over downtown Franklin Street from the NCDOT. We've been in conversation with NCDOT and they are willing to consider this option from Henderson Street to Merritt Mill. We wouldn't take it all the way over, all the way out to I-40. This would allow us to do the things we have enjoyed doing during COVID with our expanded sidewalks, with outside dining, we have some stormwater needs, we have some safety things, we have some beautification things we'd like to do. And if we took over ownership of the street, then we could do the things that we would like to do. But first we need to investigate the costs in doing so, and the council would have to agree. But the staff would like to get going, and I'd like them to have permissions. I'll be bringing that petition to you all next week for consideration and investigating the opportunities that would come taking over our downtown and making it our own and being able to enjoy the things that we would like to enjoy. So that will be coming your way next week. And like I said, I hope to have it in the packet by Friday. We're working towards that, but we'll get there. Festival continues this Saturday with the Twilight Street Arts and Crafts Market at the 140 West Plaza. It was a lot of fun last time. So there'll be food, music, and performances. The market will run from 4 to 8 p.m. and all of it's open to the public. Please check the website if you want more information. There's also going to be a police station public meeting scheduled for next Monday, October 25th. Oh, it's been postponed. Sorry, I was reading on. It's been postponed. When a new date's been set, we'll get back with you on that. And finally, I want to give a big shout out to our staff. I went over to cheer them on today. Amazing job distributing food from the food bank to our families that are still needing that extra help. There were over 230 families that came through. There was a lot of fresh produce today. It's amazing. We have such dedicated teams out there. And this week it was housing and community team. And we got a picture of them doing that together. And then all the volunteers who regularly help out. Such an important thing to do. And the families are so grateful. And it was a lot of fun to see the great fresh produce that they were distributing out there. But our staff goes above and beyond to help take care of people in our community. And we're very grateful for their help. So we do have a council meeting next week on October 27th, starting at 7 p.m. Are there any other announcements from folks? Kai?
Yes, Empowerment will be having their annual fundraiser this Sunday at the Carborough Town Commons from 2 to 5 p.m. We are celebrating our 25th year anniversary, so please come join us for some wonderful festivities and a good time.
Great, thank you for sharing that. All right, well, the first item on our agenda this evening is a splash pad item. And I have to laugh, we had a walking tour downtown today and learned about pop-up splash pads. So we'll be asking you some questions, Phil, not to put you on the spot, but we learned about other communities doing pop-up splash pads. And that was a term I hadn't even heard before. So thank you for being with us. And I know Kate Sayer is with us. She's the mom who started this petition out there. And we asked her to join us this evening as part of the working group that was created to bring folks together to discuss what a path forward for us would look like in Chapel Hill. So Phil, I turn it over to you, and thank you, Jess, for being part of this working group as well.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. Just want to confirm that this is showing my full screen of slide.
Not yet.
Not yet. All right.
Now we are seeing, it's there you go, presentation mode
there we
accomplished. Go. Very good. There you go.
Excellent. All right. Good evening, Mayor Heminger, Mayor Pro Tem Parker, and members of council. I'm Phil Fleischman, Director of Parks and Recreation for the town. The purpose of tonight's presentation on the splash pad is to provide you with exciting information regarding the interest in and options for bringing one of these cool family-friendly amenities to our park system. This presentation consists of 10 slides, which should take approximately 20 minutes to review, and there's an opportunity for questions and discussion at the end of the presentation. Kate Sayer, a community member who together with Councilmember Anderson initiated a petition in support of this splash pad concept and presented it at the council's September 22nd meeting, is also here with us tonight. She'll share her thoughts with the council during the presentation. Kevin Robinson, Park Maintenance Superintendent, will also share in portions of the presentation. So to start, particularly for those of you who may not have young children, you may be wondering, what is a splash pad? It's essentially a playground that consists of water features. It's a space where those of all ages and abilities can play and cool off, though it's particularly attractive to toddlers, preschool children, and school-age children. They're also called spray grounds or water play areas. You'll see pictures of different splash pad concepts throughout the presentation tonight that can give you a better idea of the many options and varieties that are possible. Chapel Hill doesn't have one currently, but other communities do. So tonight, the presentation consists of 3 parts. First, a review of the justification and need for a splash pad. Second, an overview of the findings to date of the splash pad work group formed to explore the concept. And third, recommendations on next steps. So as far as a justification for a splash pad, why do we need one in Chapel Hill? Well, there's a few reasons. A splash pad is a barrier-free, fully accessible source of family fun and community bonding. Splash pads provide a free place to cool off where kids and family members don't have to swim. Kids and families flock to them. And so for these reasons, they can be equity and community builders. We know that Chapel Hill is a community that very much values its parks and recreation spaces. We've taken great pride over the years in being a trendsetter in Parks and Rec, everything from the construction of our greenway system to the development of some of the firsts in the state. For example, the indoor rock climbing wall at the community center and the skate park at Homestead Park. Splash pads have become a trend in recent years within parks and recreation systems. So while we wouldn't be a trendsetter by building this particular amenity, we would be keeping up with this growing trend and making it so that families don't have to travel to nearby cities such as Durham, Mebane, or Pittsboro to enjoy this type of play. We have a reference to a splash pad in 2 park plans. In the late 2000s, the approved site master plan for Southern Community Park called for a splash pad near the playground. It was never built due to a drought and funding challenges. And in 2013, the town's adopted comprehensive parks system-wide plan outlined the need for a splash pad area to serve the Chapel Hill community. There's significant renewed interest in establishing a splash pad now. Recently, over 860 individuals have signed on to a petition that the town build one. And at its September 22nd meeting, the council received the petition from Kate Sayer, the community member and leader in the effort to bring one here. I'd like to pause the presentation to give Ms. Sayer a few minutes to talk to you about the petition, the level of support that she's found, and her ideas related to the splash pad. Ms. Sayer?
Thanks, Phil, and thank you, Mayor and Council, for your time this evening. I'm thrilled to be back here, and since we last met at the end or middle of September, I've spent some time talking with various community stakeholders about what they thought about the splash pad. I don't want to speak for anyone, any community that I don't have a lived experience in. So met with a few different people. I met with Dolores Bailey at Empowerment. I met with Lisa Cayley, who is a mother in the autism community, and then Marcella Twomley, who has a mother, she has a child who's disabled. So spoke with all of them and thought, you know, what would this mean to them? Everyone was in great support, and there were some good ideas that we had thought partially through, but not fully into what it could do for various communities. Lisa brought up, you know, we think of splash pads for young children, but what about our adults in the extraordinary community? So say those with autism who are not school age. It's something that they could enjoy. And then Marcella spoke about, you know, the nature of splash pads already being ADA compliant because many of them are zero entry and have features at different heights. So those who use wheelchairs or other assistive devices could take part in a splash pad and cooling off and recreation and outside with, all of us are looking for more things with COVID, things to do safely outside. Dolores or Miss Bailey spoke very much about the location and what that would mean. We talked through a few different ones, and all three members were saying how important it was to be centrally based if possible. Miss Bailey said, with not a whole ton of space at Hargraves, if we were to just do a feature or two, what would that say to the community? That there wasn't, that they didn't necessarily deserve more, or what would that look like? So she was not a huge fan of that, which I understand just because of the lack of space. So we were talking about, I know when we spoke before about possibly, I know Southern Community Park had a space that is a certain section of town. And when we met with Parks and Rec and the mayor was there, we spoke about, yes, it's on a bus line, but do you want to get on that bus line being really wet for a long bus ride? And then who also lives in that community? So we were thinking about, if we are doing this, if we are building this from the ground up and we are looking at it with an equity and inclusion lens, let's do that. Let's have it centrally located. Let's have it near maybe apartment complexes or places where varying socioeconomic statuses live. So it could really be community owned. So that was a big part of the discussion. As for the petition, it was, it was awesome to see so many people react so quickly. It hadn't been up that long and we collected hundreds of signatures, and anyone that I talk with is really excited about the idea of a splash pad, and hopefully in a time period where our own children could use it, hopefully before they're in high school. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'm grateful for Phil's support and Parks and Rec and the mayor and council in even hearing this and looking at what it could look like for our community, which I think could be very much a value add in many different arenas.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you for sharing with us, and thank you for all your reaching out into community and having good discussions. We appreciate that.
Great. So a couple of other things to share with you, and thank you, Ms. Sayer, for sharing that feedback. We've gotten some support as well from the Friends of Parks and Recreation nonprofit that works with us. They've signed on to support this effort, as has the Parks, Greenways, and Recreation Commission. They've submitted some correspondence to the council indicating their support of having a splash pad in Chapel Hill as well, with the potential of a portion of it possibly being funded from the town's American Rescue Plan funds. That was reflected in the commission's correspondence with the council. So as far as where we are, we've made a little bit of a reference to our working group. In July, Mayor Heminger appointed a work group comprised of Councilmember Anderson, Parks Commission members, and staff to explore options for establishing one in town. I'd certainly like to acknowledge and recognize Councilmember Anderson for her involvement in this work group and the ideas and enthusiasm that she has shared, and also Parks Commission members Wesley McMahon and Leah Butcher for their valuable ideas and insight. As you can see here on this list, several Parks and Rec team members with technical expertise are also a part of the working group. And so in order to gain a better perspective of what we could have here, members of this working group took out or went on a road trip to look at some area splash pads, to look at features, costs, and operational models. And you see a picture of us there at Mebane Splash Pad. No, we did not wear swimsuits out to the splash pads, but we did observe kids and families who were having great fun. There was a lot of laughter and smiles at the splash pads that we visited in late August. And so to talk a little bit about what we found, I'd like to introduce Kevin Robinson, our Park Maintenance Superintendent. Kevin?
Thank you, Phil. So in our field trip, as Phil mentioned, we concentrated on 3 local communities that had parks: Burlington, Mebane, and the new one down in Pittsburgh. So as you can see here, this is a picture of the one in Burlington, and this was the nicest of the 3 that we reviewed, and probably comes the closest to what we would envision here in Chapel Hill. It had a number of features offered, and at this site, we met with the design firm who worked on the project and shared a lot of really good, valuable information with us. So this park was also the biggest that we visited and really seemed to appeal to a wider age group. The park was, as you can tell, fenced in. It has picnic shelters, bathrooms, and more picnic tables off to the side. And in total, it was $1 million facility. 400,000 of that was the splash pad, 13 features, 4,000 square feet. This park recirculated the water. So there are chemical costs with that to treat the water, and those costs can be significant. The system itself also costs upwards of about $100,000. They spend, some of the information we're gathering isn't, everybody does their finances a little different, but the information we've gathered, they spend $20,000 to $30,000 per year on staffing. And again, the chemical costs, utility costs for water, power, all that kind of stuff. So they also have private parties there, and those staffing costs run about $10,000 as well. And it rents for $160 for a 2-hour block. So next we headed to Mebane. And as you can see, this is a much different park. This is part of a very large park there that has soccer fields, a picnic shelter in the background, a playground there as well. They had a lot of open space, a walking trail for folks to go on. And the splash pad was much larger. It seemed to just appeal to toddlers. That's what you see there. And that's mainly what we saw when we were there. It was just the little itty bitty kids. But again, it was open to the public, not fenced in. It cost around $300,000. It had 9 features, 3,000 square feet, and it's about 2 years old. This water park does not recirculate the water. They're using city water right there. They capture that water and send it to a retention pond right next to the facility, and they have no staffing, as it's just, again, open to the public. The kids go over and hit a button. It stays on for about 15 minutes, running the different features, and then it cuts off, and the kids have to go over and hit the button again. But it seemed like part of the fun really for them. They're budgeting about $5,000 for maintenance, and like I said, there's only about 9 features, and they share the cost of the water with Graham, and they just about 50-50, and so $5,000 each for a total of $10,000 there in Mebane. So finally, we headed down to Pittsburgh. Cost there was completely covered by the Preston developers who are building Chatham Park there. Again, as you can see, this splash pad is part of a larger park. There's a lot of playground features around it. There's a dog park there. There's plenty of parking, a picnic shelter, and bathrooms there as well. So this one costs about $420,000. It's 4,032 square feet. It has 12 features, and this one does recirculate the water. The developer is covering the first 3 years of maintenance costs, and they're budgeting about $10,000 a year for maintenance. But again, there's no staff in that number. So that is the 3 that we visited. We're also currently trying to gather more information. We're trying to talk to the folks in Thomasville and Sanford, as they have water parks as well, and gain more information that'll help us with this decision moving forward. And that's what I have. And so I'll hand it back over to Phil for the next steps.
Thanks, Kevin. So as we've reviewed tonight, the response to the splash pad concept has been overwhelmingly positive. From our preliminary analysis, we've learned that the development costs can range widely depending on the size, number of features, and amount of site work and support facilities that may be needed. And you've seen that in the examples that we shared. So as far as the costs, at least in the ones that we've looked at so far, we could be looking somewhere in the $400,000 to $1 million range to construct one, again, depending on those variables that I mentioned. Our work group has identified several preliminary options as far as parks that could have a splash pad. The picture there on the right of this screen is actually part of the site master plan for Southern Community Park. And that's a location where there could be space for a splash pad. Homestead Park is also a possibility near the Aquatic Center. As Ms. Sayer mentioned, there's the possibility of putting a smaller splash pad area at 80 Clark Pool to replace the aging and underutilized wading or baby pool that's there on site. That latter option could be an eligible expense for American Rescue Plan funds. We don't feel that this list of locations is all inclusive, and we're not asking the council to recommend a location tonight. We're not prepared to recommend a single best location tonight, but just to give you an idea of what we've been looking at and considering, we share that with you. We'd like to do further vetting through the work group and the Parks Commission first. So the options as far as next steps are outlined on this slide. Tonight, we'd like to take the first step, which is to receive council feedback on this concept. Specifically, would you like for us to move forward? Are we moving in the right direction? And then from there, we'll take the step to more closely examine the size and options of amenities and locations with the work group and the commission. And then we'll be able to determine costs and funding options and move forward from there. I want to mention that community engagement is really vital towards this whole process. And of course, we have the petition that's kicking that off, demonstrating the need, but we certainly envision robust community engagement and public input throughout this process as we move forward. So really some questions that might help with the discussion tonight. Are we moving in the right direction? Do you support the staff and the work group continuing exploration of this concept? And then how would you like to be engaged regarding this moving forward? So Mayor Heminger and council, thank you so much.
Thank you, Phil. And thank you to the working group. All right, council members, they're asking for your feedback. What would you like to share, please? Amy, then Karen.
First, I have a question. You mentioned specifically that the baby pool replacement would be ARP eligible. So would the other ones not be? Can you walk me through a little bit how we could make those funds available?
So something regarding the ARP funds, we need to work closely with BMD to determine what is and what is not eligible, and certainly receive public feedback through the processes that council has determined. The reason why I mentioned specifically that location may be eligible is because that facility is located within a qualified census tract for the program. And then also that would be considered replacing or repairing or replacing a park amenity that's already in existence, which could tie back into that notion of, impacts on the town's revenue and what that affected our ability to do with projects.
Okay, thank you. My only comment is I think this is great. I mean, my children are long grown out of splash pad land, but I know that this is something that a lot of families in town are really looking forward to. One suggestion I would make is I know you've looked at very kind of equipment-oriented splash pads, and I know it's possible to do more naturalistic places. I was recently visiting the Museum of Life and Science, and they have kind of a creek play area, which I think recirculates the water. It does all the things that you would need to do to keep a healthy equipment for the kids to use, but it looks like a natural place. So if on one of your field trips, I might suggest you go over and talk to them and learn from them about what they've done. There's also a good resource over at the NC State College of Design called the Natural Learning Initiative, which is very focused on getting kids into the natural world and helping them explore and play there. So I think they might also be a good resource for you.
Thank you. That's great information.
Thank you.
Karen?
Thanks for this presentation. It's great. Definitely supportive of continuing to move forward on this. It'd be hard to find somebody who isn't wanting splash pads. I think they're great. And as you all have shared, and we know it's really is a more what's the words aren't coming, less expensive. That's the word I'm going to use, because I can't come up with the word, than swimming pools and maintenance and all of those things. So I think it's a great way to go. And certainly my kids still love them, even though they're getting a little bit older. They would certainly play in it. And I really like that we are, we're getting the putt and get a splash pad. So much families have to drive somewhere else to do these things. So I think it's really important that we're bringing them, keeping them local. A few comments and questions. One thing, I was just talking to some folks at the Arena Center. I know they're interested in a splash pad. They actually brought that up. So I wanted to kind of put that in the mix and make sure we're talking with representatives of the center. As we move forward, of course, we'll need to look at the options for some funding sources, the trade-offs, what are the different ideas staff have about where funding could come from. I don't know. I think we've talked a little bit about our, parks payment in lieu and where those funds kind of sit, and whether there's some opportunistic, new developments in the pipeline that might be able to, if it worked out to help with it, a la Pittsburgh. Anyway, just looking at different options, grant funding even. I'm assuming, but I want to check this to make sure I'm right, that we would be looking more likely at existing park spaces where there already are infrastructure in place versus starting somewhere like American Legion that doesn't have infrastructure. Are we considering all options right now?
From my perspective, we would be considering all options right now. I certainly think that there's a definite advantage of putting it where there's already some existing infrastructure, because that can keep the costs lower. So if there's already restrooms and a water source and things of that nature nearby, or a picnic shelter, that makes it something where we have less of an upfront investment to kind of build those support facilities.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I guess for me, one of the factors that I just would love to see as we move forward, analysis of is that balance between access and, kind of what you were talking about at the beginning, is that, are we investing everything in one site that's, more expensive and has more features versus smaller, maybe a couple of smaller ones that provide more access to more community members. I think, especially since we're talking about little kids, mostly using it, I think kind of proximity is going to be really important. So I know Southern Village is a great location in a lot of ways, but it's so far to one side of town. I'd be a little worried about it feeling kind of accessible to the whole community. But maybe there's a way to do multiple ones that would help balance that. So access is definitely going to be something I'm looking at and evaluating. And then I wasn't sure not to bring up anything negative, but we saw in the news there was a tragedy recently related to a splash pad where the water was contaminated. I don't know what that was about. How do we avoid that? Do we know enough about that yet?
Well, so there would be very strict standards that we would need to adhere to, and we would utilize we envision utilizing our staff who are already certified as pool and spa operators that would be working to balance the chemicals and make sure that things were safe at the location. So we would certainly work with the health department and our staff with that technical expertise to make sure that we were operating our splash pad or splash pads in the safest manner possible.
Okay. Thank you for that. And the last question I have is around, I know the Parks and Rec Board is advocating for us to start kind of a parks master planning process. And I think there's there's a need for that. And so would this be kind of part of that or kind of separate, or I don't, how do you see those two kind of working together?
That's a really good question. So, our current parks plan from 2013 indicates a need for a splash pad. So we have a documented justification already, but we would certainly envision with the new master planning effort that there would be consideration for, needs for recreation of all types, including splash pads. And I guess it would depend to some extent on how fast this project might be able to move along versus when that new comprehensive plan would be completed.
Okay, thanks. And I like Amy's comment as well. I think that's an interesting idea to explore. But thank you.
Okay, I have Michael, then Alan.
Yeah, just two quick questions, Phil. First, I heard you mention Homestead and Southern Village. Is Community Park at, off of Estes, since that's almost in the exact geographic center of town, is that also a viable place to put it?
So it's a really great central location, as you mentioned. The challenge at Community Center Park is the parking and really the lack of parking for events and activities. And with the steady business at the center and as a connection into the Bowling Creek Trail, parking is typically at a premium here. And so adding an amenity like this would obviously, we need to think about additional parking as well if we were to consider this location.
Great, thank you. Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. And then just you talked about in the questions you asked, sort of what do you see as sort of the next step or the next piece of work to be done in assessing this, and what decision point would that lead us to as a council?
So I think if the council is generally supportive of this concept, we'd take that information back to our work group, and then we try to further refine the size and scope of this project, and then look at possible locations that could house something. And then, of course, once we get to that stage, then it's really looking both with the town manager and BMD, looking at budgetary options and kind of what that might look like at that point. Obviously, at some point, we would need some money for design for this before we could do a really robust public engagement process. We'd want to have some professional drawings created and whatnot. So, I think tonight, just knowing that the council is supportive will be good information for us to take back to the work group, and then we can kind of try to push our exploration along further.
Right, but what's the next question or decision you're going to be asking from the council, and when do you see it coming to us?
That's a really good question, and I'm not certain of exactly when something might come back to you all. I would think that it could conceivably come as a part of discussions about the American Rescue Plan funds or potentially the next budget process for the town. Obviously we'd want to try to coincide with one of those established processes, but that could be subject to change because really what you're getting tonight is kind of our most current information that we have on this project. But I'd envision something within the next several months. I know there's a lot of community interest in trying to move this along.
So maybe what would be helpful to me, because that's kind of the guy I am, and it doesn't have to be a council presentation. It could just be, something that the manager sends to us. But if you could sort of share with us a work plan that would lay out the major milestones and when things are likely to come to council, and so that we can start understanding, is this something that can be done in 6 months, a year, sort of getting a better handle on just what's involved and hopefully, what we can do to make this happen quickly.
Okay, great.
Okay, I have Alan, then Hongbin, then Ty.
Yep, thank you for the presentation. This looks promising. I just want to echo a couple of points made earlier. I know Karen had mentioned that Arena Center is interested in having a splash pad. Would be a great location. I mean, certainly location-wise, I think one thing to keep in mind is to have splash pads that are in proximity to bus lines. So I know Arena Center, there's the HS bus that runs by there. And I think kind of more generally, we should be thinking to have spaces along or in proximity to our bus stops. And I agree with Karen's statement earlier about the number of splash pads. I'd rather go with a couple than to go with just one in one part of town. I did have a couple of questions. So I guess one is related to the typical kinds of costs related to maintenance that we should anticipate. Could you say a bit about not amounts, but just what kinds of costs related to maintenance should we expect with splash pads?
Kevin, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, so it's the upkeep of the actual features, whether it be nozzles getting clogged, replacing nozzles, piece getting broken, something to that effect. If we went with a recirculating system, you have the chemicals to keep it balanced so that we don't run into a situation like in Texas. And then labor costs are big as well. So there's a lot of different things, water, power, all the utilities that come along with it as well. But there are significant costs with it that would have to be worked into the operating budget.
Got it. Thank you. And my last question is about the base of the splash pad. So I did read about problems going on, I think up in Michigan and maybe other parts of the country, where you had these splash pads that had these concrete bases, and apparently on very hot days, kids are running around barefoot. That burned quite a few children, and so was wondering about the thinking around the base of some of these splash pads.
Sure, I think we can look into that as we get a little further along with the designer to make sure that the surface that's installed is both a slip resistant surface while also being one that hopefully would not absorb and retain the heat like you're describing. I think that's really good feedback for us.
Thank you.
Okay, I have Hong Bin Tai, then Jess.
Yeah. I know that the budget that you presented at the beginning, it has a pretty wide range. I think that really depends on what kind of vision that we have for this splash pad. Do we think it's just like neighborhood playground addition, or are we thinking it's something like a destination? Like when people talk about Chapel Hill, they think, oh, this is something that we're going to Chapel Hill and we're going to their splash pad. So is there like that kind of a more big picture kind of conversation has been done, or have we decided, are we like what kind of vision we have for this splash pad? I think these are very different ideas of how to do that. I don't know if if our staff has engaged in that exploration or had some discussion on that.
I think that the discussion tonight can be very helpful to us to shape that vision. I agree with you. That's important to kind of know what the vision is, so we would know what the scope of the project could be or should be. So we can discuss that further with the splash pad work group and come up with kind of that idea. I think in general, from what I've heard, there's a real interest in getting something done quickly, no matter the size, so that there's that opportunity for families. However, there's also a thought that this really could be a destination point within our park system or somewhere in Chapel Hill. And I know that the Burlington splash pad that you saw a picture of is a really good example of one that's a destination. It's got several different sizes of features and a good number of them, plenty of space for folks to spread out. You know, a picnic shelter, it can kind of be a several hour long or half a day long experience for a family. So, you know, I think we can take this feedback and certainly give it more consideration. But those are at least our preliminary thoughts at this point too.
Yeah, well, I can certainly see the arguments for both, I mean that adding splash pad as just an addition for a neighborhood playground, or having that as a destination that people, when they talk about Chapel Hill, like people living in Durham or living in Cary, they can talk about the Chapel Hill splash pad and they're like coming over here. So that could even become a like economic development kind of addition for our town. Like people come to our downtown just to think that it's a great place to be. We have been talking about we need to add destinations in our down. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying I'm going for adding it to the downtown. I'm just using that as an example to say that we have been talking about we need adding family destinations. So I just feel like if we're going to make investment in it, I kind of think that it needs to be something that's really make a difference or put Chapel Hill on the map. I don't know, but of course that has a limit of, you know, the funding and all the other things. But I don't know if that has been discussed or at least being explored and say, well, especially you're going to put significant, maintenance in it. I just feel like if we're going to do that, I'm hoping it is something that will really make a difference for our town. That's my thought.
Thank you.
Okay, Ty, then Jess.
Thank you. Yeah, this does look great. I really appreciate the racial equity lens that you all have applied, and I encourage you to keep talking to more diverse stakeholders and involving them. I'm really glad to hear you talk to Ms. Bailey. I think the location is also important. Is it Umstead Park that's on, like right behind Northside, on, I think that's Bowling Creek Trail? Is that also potentially considered as a location?
It is, you know, right now, really anything is possible. We can certainly make sure we analyze that site.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think if Hargraves doesn't have enough room, I think that, you know, is still semi-close to downtown area, near Northside, all that good stuff. So that might be a really good location. In terms of using ARPA funds for this, I definitely would want to see kind of what alternative uses for those funds are and kind of weigh them against each other if we were to use that funding source for this. So I look forward to seeing staff's proposal of kind of the various funding sources. And in terms of, I think you had a third question about kind of how we want to be involved continuing on this. I think just bringing it back to another work session would be good. I like our ability to have kind of more robust discussion around this. So I look forward to seeing you all at a future work session.
Okay, Jess.
Sorry, we're negotiating candy intake at the moment. So, well, first of all, thank you to Kate and to the staff and for everybody for kind of moving this along. And thanks to my colleagues for all your great support and comments. I think it's really exciting. And I just think it's something I don't usually love, like one-off initiatives, but I just think this has been something we've been talking about for so long. And I think it also just speaks to, I think something Karen was saying about really needing fun things to do, like putt-putt and all these things, and just having more family-friendly things given how family rich of a community we are. So I really like the idea of something more natural. I don't know a ton. My kids have definitely been in the Life and Science creek or whatever it is. They have definitely come out very wet and muddy. So we've done it. It's very fun. I don't know kind of as much about it, but I think it's a cool idea to think through how at least something could be a little more natural or integrated into a natural setting. But I don't know that it necessarily needs to be an actual, you know, using the creek or anything, but it doesn't sound like they've been doing that. So I think it's a really cool idea. I think in terms of the location, I think Rogers Road is, the Arena Center is county as far as I know, which I know makes it a little more challenging, but it's also walkable to Homestead. So that's a way to get it close, but in town. And similarly, I think Umstead is a way to be near North Side on that trail. So I like those ideas. That led me to one of my questions about potentially engaging the county or finding out about some other funding streams. I think now would be the time to start asking partners if they'd be willing to participate. And I think this would be something Hongbin, I think your question is a good one about, do we want this to kind of be a destination, or is it really just kind of a little thing? And I think I've been envisioning it, I think, as more of a destination. So, thinking that through and what does that mean in terms of engaging our partners and hopefully having something that really is a great place for Orange County and all our neighbors around. Another question is just about, are there any other grants out there just that we could supplement, any other funding sources that we haven't looked at yet? I love one, splash pad is great, 2 is better. So I'm not opposed to 2, but I also don't want us to let perfect be the enemy of the good. So I would rather get 1. And then as part of these are all the splash padders, they're all here for the conversation. I think it would be great to integrate that into the parks master plan about where, locations could be. So they're more spread out, but I would like us to move quicker than that and not let kind of wanting 2 and having that accessibility of 2 make us not do 1, I guess. But hello, please don't fall. And I think the other question I had was just about potentially doing someplace in an economic center, like University Place or Caraway or something like that, if there's a way to partner with someone who has parking and who maybe wants people to come and spend money, and then could also be a partner in terms of construction. So I know that's a little, whoa.
I was there.
Kids.
I was there.
I'll stop. I'm good.
Thank you. Okay, I'll throw in my comments. Thank you for getting moving on this. I would like us to keep moving at a faster speed than we normally do. We are planning to have a work session on December 1st. If there's any way you can come back with any additional information, even if it's just in written form, that would be helpful as we're looking at ARPA monies. We also learned today about pop-up splash pads, and maybe that's an opportunity too to try out something at the 80 Clark Pool that's a small splash pad pop-up to see if it makes any sense, and then we would know. And then we could use that kind of facility for other tracks music events or ported around. So I'd love you to investigate what it would take for a pop-up. I know it's not going to be a destination. I'm not talking about replacing the destination mode. This is just an addition to find out. I do love the idea of a central location. I think it's more appropriate in the middle of town, Umstead Park, Homestead Park. I don't know if Cedar Falls would qualify. They're all on bus lines, but we do need to have access to bathrooms. And I think a picnic shelter makes a whole lot of sense for people to have their towels and activities. But talking about families with small children, you're going to want to have parking that's really close and accessible for people to get in and out, especially with wet feet and wet clothing, all that kind of thing. We need to do something. And I think the sooner you can find out some costs and nail down some locations and give us those options, when we go through the ARPA money discussion, then we're going to know what we have to work with, and knowing a cost helps that as well. The Arena Center, I think it's a great idea if we loop in somebody from the county to talk with us. Legally, I know it was very complicated when we did the community center. We had to have a special agreement for spending money outside of town when we partner with the county. So I'd love to be able to figure out design and costs for doing something there and work with the county on that to see how we could make something work. I do think that we really need to focus on equity and availability and locations where people can come who don't normally have access to a pool or other water resources. I think this is a huge step for helping families. So you have enough information from us, I think you're hearing a go full speed and come back to us as soon as you can with some information on this. I would love to partner with a developer or somebody who could do this. So I think it's worth having that conversation with whomever, whatever project we think might be able to help with this. I don't know that's UPlace or Caraway. I don't know. So we're going to have to reach out and see what that might make any sense to do. But I don't know those of you who participated in the Tracks music events at UPlace this fall, but it was really a fabulous family event. Kids playing, music going, adults sitting in chairs or wandering around. It was just a really great coming together community. And I love that we can do these kinds of things and need to keep doing these kinds of things to bring community together. Okay. Well, thank you, Kate, for your hard work, and I hope you'll stay engaged with our work session. Thank you, Phil and Kevin and everyone who's been, and Jess, thanks for working on this, and go full speed ahead, please.
Thank you.
All right. And staying with our topic of water this evening, we are moving on to stormwater, and we have Lauren Clark here to get us started on a couple of conversations, I believe.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. I am Lauren Clark. I'm your Deputy Town Manager. And tonight I'm here to introduce the update from the Booker Creek Working Group. So the working group has met along with members of our town staff, particularly our public works and stormwater and engineering staff. And we've met twice so far with the facilitation assistance from Maggie Chotis from the Dispute Settlement Center. And tonight, the chairs, Pamela Schultz and John Morris, will share updates on the group's progress to date and to seek your feedback on their draft mission statement, as well as proposed topics for future meetings. So with that, I will turn things over to John and Pamela. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, John and Pamela. Thank you. And thank you for chairing and working with the group. We assembled you quite a group of expertise from our community, and we're very excited to hear what you have to share with us.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I'm John Morris, and I'm the co-chair of the working group along with Pamela Schultz, and Jeanette Bench is our vice chair. You all know the history of how we got here. There was some opposition to parts of the watershed plan for Lower Booker Creek, and the town council deauthorized some of those projects and appointed the working group to recommend some new directions. So we appreciate the action the council took, and Mayor Heminger, we appreciate that you appointed some very experienced members for the working group. There's a great diversity of knowledge and experience, and so we should be able to profit from every single member's particular contribution. I'd just like to say, I'd also like to thank Samantha Bauer with the town staff, and a almost scarily efficient and helpful and timely person who has helped us start our communications off and organize our agendas. We're also getting valuable assistance from Maggie Chotos, who is a facilitator who has worked with the town on several projects. So we're off to a start. We've had 2 meetings. What we've accomplished up to now is to adopt a mission statement. We're considering some agenda items that will help us inform ourselves and be able to accomplish the tasks that we've been given. And so let's see, if we can bring up that first slide, we'll look at our mission statement. Okay, thank you. You can see that this is a fairly brief and general mission statement, and we intended it to be that way because we want something that's very simple, easy to understand, and points us in the right direction. And the details of what our work plan is and the recommendations that we make, that's going to have to come as we get on with our work. So you can see that we want our recommendations to be consistent with all the goals of the town's stormwater management program. And that's, of course, reducing flooding, but also improve water quality of stormwater and protect and restore natural stream corridors. We want to be consistent with the climate action and response plan, consistent with Chapel Hill's equity goals in the strategic plan. And we want to have a balance between flood damage reduction and minimizing environmental damage, and make sure that projects that are recommended have benefits that or greater than their financial, environmental, and social costs. And finally, we want our recommendations to reflect full consultation with the Chapel Hill community that's affected by stormwater flooding and also by proposed solutions. I'd just like to say that Councilmember Amy Ryan has offered to help advise us on how to go about community consultation. We appreciate that. And this mission statement is the work, the chair and the chairs and the co-chair started out with a draft, and we had lots of good additions and revisions that we got from the working group at our recent meeting. So here's our mission statement. We're ready to go. And if we could look at the next slide, please. Thank you. So these are some of the potential agenda topics we're looking at. One of the most important things is to define the problem of flood damages in terms of the location of structures flooded and the amount of damage that occurs to them. And this is one of the points that Mayor Heminger pointed out to us when she created the group, that she wanted us to answer this question. In order to evaluate flood damage reduction projects, you have to know how much damage to structures is happening at a certain flood elevation. And then if you reduce it a certain amount, how much is the damage reduced? And so that's your measuring stick to see if things are economically justified. We also want to get some reports on community experience with what you might call green infrastructure, things like swales, downspout disconnection, rain gardens, and many other things. We're going to be trying to find sample watersheds, perhaps in some community here in North Carolina or even elsewhere, where extensive use of these green infrastructure measures has been put into place, and then see if we can get some quantitative measure of how effective they have been or not been in terms of reducing flood elevations. And I took a peek at the following presentation, which is also on stormwater, and I can see that a big threat is that the North Carolina General Assembly may take away the authority of the town to do many of the stormwater management actions it needs to do. I hope that doesn't happen, but I haven't been consulted by the General Assembly lately. And so it just strikes me that there are examples in Durham and other places of community-based green infrastructure efforts that rely on, property owners coming together to make improvements on their property, and also some financial and technical assistance from the town, and also perhaps available through the state also. And so those measures would not be affected by the anticipated or hopefully not anticipated action by the General Assembly. We want to see a town report. We've been focusing on flood damage reduction, but of course the stormwater program and also the Dixon report has a huge number of valuable recommendations on improving stormwater quality and preserving natural stream corridors. And so we'd like to have the town review those for us, and perhaps some of the solutions we recommend can hit several of those topics at once. And this last point, this is something I've been familiar with over the years. Many communities that try to reduce flood damages are most successful when they draw on a great variety of means. And for example, they may use some structural measures like dams or channel improvements, but also things like flood proofing, which depending on the situation can be very, very cost effective. And another viable tool is helping homeowners that are subject to flooding to get technical or maybe financial assistance in elevating their structures, or even buying out repeatedly damaged structures, which sometimes can be very cost effective. So this is where we are right now. We're involving the entire working group. We've invited the working group to submit more ideas so that we can evaluate all these things and get an agenda that really moves us forward. last thing I would to say is a request to the town. We're one of the biggest issues we're working with is how can we define what we as a working group do and what the town staff does? And then how can we establish the best connection and working relationship with the town staff? You know, there are many town officials involved in stormwater. We're not always sure exactly who does what. So we'd really like for the town to designate a chief contact person and a champion for the working group. Someone who would basically say, we know what you're trying to do. We support you. We hope you're successful, and we'll help you contact the town people who you need to work with on various efforts. So I think that would really be a big boost for us. One of the mayor's questions was, how long is it going to take you to come up with your recommendations? That's really hard to say at this point because I'd like to say we've had a good positive spirit among the members. We're working together. We need to think in detail about the nature of our recommendations. I guess I would say that my instinct is that we should have a relatively short process that makes some general direction recommendations and then passes the ball back to the town, because we really can't do, we have members who can do data analysis, modeling, et cetera, but they have day jobs. And so they can't do that full time. So that's where we are. And thanks for your support. And Pamela and I are here to try to answer any questions.
Thank you, John and Pamela. This is very helpful. We know we've put a lot at you, and I purposely wanted to see if you could come up with better ideas for a framework and a mission statement, and you did. That was really great. One of the questions I did ask you is, are you lacking any expertise at the table in an area that we need to find additional support for? You may not know that yet until you get further into the process, but I'd love you to reach back out and let me know, because we do have a lot of great resources in our community. But at first glance, are you missing any resource? You're still kind of finding your water legs there?
Well, I think that we have a great variety of very relevant expertise and experience on the working group. We're looking around for some outside experts who can come and speak to our agenda. And so that's, some temporary help that we're trying to line up to help us in that temporary way. And the other main thing, though, I think, is to get this link established with the town staff so that we can work productively with the town staff.
Yeah. I'd also like to ask you, one of your other agenda topics could be inviting the Eastwood Lake Association over just to have a conversation. Don't know if it's going to yield anything, but they were interested in this topic, and they were interested to know if there could be a partnership. And I think it'd be great if you just had a conversation as one of your agenda topics. It doesn't have to be first on the list, but it may be an opportunity. And I'll just say maybe. All right, I saw some hands go up. Michael, and then Hong Bin.
Yeah. Thanks, John, and Pamela for taking this on. It's a biggie, so we really appreciate you willing to dive into it. And thank you, John, for your really good report. Just a couple of questions. First, about the mission statement. I don't know if I was reading too much into it, but it talked about, it seemed to be talking about making stormwater recommendations in general. And I wanted to understand if you see your work just focusing in on the Booker Creek watershed, or you think that your group is going to talk about stormwater and, for the town entire.
Well, that's a really good question. In one of our earlier meetings, a planning meeting, council member Amy Ryan suggested that the general principles that we recommend for Booker Creek, they should be things that could be applicable and considered for other parts of town. The issues that we face in Booker Creek with stormwater management are the same that we face all over town. So, that would be up to the town council to determine how widely they want to apply this. But I think if we come up with good recommendations for Booker Creek, they should be applicable to similar situations all over town.
So John, in that regard, one of the things you might want to be thinking about, you talked about, I think it's in the bullet point second to last in your mission statement, you talked about, essentially doing a cost benefit analysis, right? Making sure the benefits of stormwater, flooding reduction outweigh the financial, ecological and environmental costs. So one of the things that might be really helpful there is not only perhaps recommendations for Booker Creek, but if you could really nail down a methodology that could then be applied in other situations. So think about whether that's something you feel, your group is, has the capability to do, or at least outline, a series of steps that perhaps that the staff could use to put together that kind of a methodology. The second question was, thinking in terms of goals. I appreciate the mission statement, but I think one of the things it would be helpful if you could spend some time thinking through, not you personally, but the group as a whole, is what the actual goals are that you're trying to meet. Because you don't, if you don't have specific goals in mind, how will you know when you've solved the problem? So I think that, I don't know what those goals should be, but I think that as you get into more analytical phases and coming up with specific recommendations, I think, you need to be thinking about what goals you want to evaluate various options against, so you can then make a good decision which one you think is the best. So that would be another point that I would raise. The other thing, you said something, and this is really more directed toward Lauren and the staff rather than you, John, is sort of the linkage with our town staff, because that made me think that this is in some way independent of our staff. And I had thought that there were staff members on the working group. I seem to recall there was. So it seems to me that this shouldn't be looking for a link to our town staff, but this should be an effort that's fully integrated with our town staff, and that at all points they're working with you, so that this isn't an outside working group telling staff what to do or not to do, but this is something the staff and the working group jointly develop together. So am I missing something there?
Well, that's an issue that we're really working hard on. It's very important to work out. The reason we're here is that a lot of citizen comments and eventually the town council did not accept the direction that the town was going in on stormwater. And so, the council is calling for a change in some respects. So that's what we've been charged to recommend. But in doing it, we're really trying to figure out the right way to work constructively with the staff. And we think the first step is to have a liaison person and a champion for us that can help us connect with the staff in the right ways.
But aren't staff members already members of the working group? I mean, that's the way the last time I saw the membership of the working group, there were staff members on it. I thought they were an integral part of the working group. So I don't understand why there's this challenge about having a linkage, since they're supposed to be at the table with you. Lauren, can you explain that better, please?
Yes, Councilmember, you are correct that staff members are a part of the working group. So we have Alicia Goldstein from our stormwater staff, Chris Roberts from our engineer, town engineer as well, are part of that group. And then we also have some support staff who are participating in all of the meetings. So we are at the table for every conversation. Lance Norris, the the public works director, is also at the table. So we are all there for the discussion and are participating. And we actually had a conversation with the working group at their meeting on Monday, and also with the co-chairs and with the leadership team to talk about the staff's role. And I think we came to a good place, recognizing that the staff has some expertise that we'd like to bring to the table as well when it's appropriate, and that we're available to be a resource to the group as we're needed. So we are at the table. That is correct.
Well, I think it's more than just a resource. I mean, the staff are the ones who really know where all the flooding problems are, what we've done in the past, what solutions we've used in the past. So I think it's more than a resource that the staff, I mean, they've got to be, rolling up their sleeves with the working group and working collaboratively with them. I mean, I would hate to see this turn into some kind of an adversarial process.
Amy, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, just a quick comment. So the way the working group is structured right now, it's the community members who form the core of the voting members of the work group. So staff is there in a support position. I'm a non-voting member. So it's really the work group are the ones who will be coming up with recommendations. So as Lauren says, staff is at the table, they're in the discussions, they're there providing information and that kind of thing, but they're not part of the decision-making team as such.
How was that decided?
The manager and I discussed, and it left it to his discretion to decide how we integrated and how it could work well together. I do think this objective, though, could be met. I think we can figure out either the champion role or figure out a way to make sure that we are working in collaboratively, and it's not confrontational anyway, that it's a collaborative effort to bring good recommendations forward together. And I think we can work through that. I think Maggie Chodas is skilled at doing those kinds of things. And I think if John and Pamela and Amy, I'll put it on your plate too, talk with her about this is the place we'd like to get to, that we're collaborating with the staff and their input and coming forward recommendations that everyone can support. Does that sound?
Yeah, I mean.
Oh, sorry, if I could just add, I think part of what is, and John, maybe you can correct me if I don't have this right, but I think part of what's motivating this is just, when we are, because in between meetings, we're trying to prepare the agendas and we are certainly working with the staff very much, but if there is a primary person who is the right person to ask, if we're asking for particular data, who is that person? So John's idea of having, because certainly we're working with the staff and want to continue, but there's so many staff members on the group, who is the, who is the right person to say, okay, here's some data that we need to get, and we don't want to be the ones bugging the staff, who should that go through? And maybe that's, Lauren, maybe that's Lance, who are here tonight. But possibly designating that as a champion was something that was an idea that we thought might be helpful.
Okay, so I'm going to put it back to Lauren and Lance and Ms. Ryan. If you guys can work this out and figure out what you heard the need, the request, if you can help figure that out and make that a real pathway. I think I don't think we need to solve it here for you. I think that's something you need to come up with your group, because you'll understand better when the requests come forward. So
yeah, my understanding too is that this is more of a logistical issue, not an us them or a kind of thing. I think it's just simply trying to make sure that there's a point person so that when there is a specific request, it's easy to get it into staff. We're not bugging lots of different people. We just, have somebody to keep that workflow organized.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. I think the meetings so far have been very positive, and I think it's a great group of people that have been assembled to take this on. So, yeah, and I guess if I could just say quickly, one response to Michael, one of your comments about would this be, looking just at Booker Creek or looking wider, I think it is important for us to have somewhat of a broad scope, in the sense that all of these projects started as sub-watershed studies, where we did multiple sub-watershed studies, and the idea has been to work through the watershed that we live in. And the prioritization of the projects was being done not just for one sub-watershed, but looking at the wider scope of the entire town of Chapel Hill. So we're certainly focused right now on the Booker Creek as the watershed. That is the focus of the group. But again, it's really important to understand that's just one of the watersheds that the town has already looked at, and we already have reports on those. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in there.
Just to use a bad metaphor, I'd be careful about trying to boil the ocean.
Okay, thank you. We need to move along. I had Hong Bin, then Karen.
Yeah, well, I think a few weeks ago when the council consented on creating this group, there's some questions I'm not quite sure that. So what is the deliverable for this project, and what's the process? Are we expecting this group to generating the analysis like the cost benefit analysis and all the impact analysis by this group, or they're just only specifying the goals or how to do those analysis, and then we're going to have someone else, we're going to hire someone else to do the analysis? What is the process?
I don't know that we've gotten that far yet on a decision. They were to investigate other opportunities, and then I think those opportunities are presented back to the council, and the staff would be the ones investigating how to do the analysis on that. I wouldn't expect this group to do the analysis on it.
Okay, so
just speaking to the point of the product, at the end of this, we do envision an overall report that would compile all the information that we've learned as collectively as a group, that would go back to council to be able to make further decisions, but as well as hoping to reach some goals along the way and possibly give some recommendations in between now and 6 months from now.
Okay, so as you mentioned that we had this watershed studies, multiple of them. I mean, by themselves, they are very comprehensive engineering reports, but they're only engineering reports. I think that's the reason that the community feel there's very important aspects that has not been discussed or has not been included in that report, with the impact to the environment, with the ecosystem, and what kind of cost benefit analysis that will include those aspects as part of the cost and the benefits. So I think that will be something that's well, at least I thought that is the reason that the council suspended the previous report and the mitigation plan. And then we are saying that we need to do some additional analysis or sort for other mitigation solutions. So for me, it is very important that for whatever the new analysis that we're going to decide to do, it needs to be comprehensive. It needs to be based on data, and it includes all different aspects of cost and benefit analysis. I'm not a stormwater engineer, but I mean, from my understanding of cost benefit analysis, I can see it is something very technical and data driven. You probably need to do simulations as they did in the watershed studies. So I don't know, is that something this work group has the capacity to do, or is the work group just to identify those needs and have someone else, or maybe hiring someone else to do it? That part I'm not sure that I really heard what is the plan.
I think when they are able to put forward some recommendations, and we can determine whether they're able to help do the cost benefit analysis or not. If the recommendations are there's 2 houses that flood in this neighborhood, and we could do interim steps to help that situation versus retrofit, I don't know, they're going to come back with some ideas, and then our staff can look at doing how to do the cost benefit analysis of those ideas.
Yeah, but I mean, I feel like without the analysis and assuming, let's say, different intensities of the storm and what kind of impact is going to be, I think there are lots of details about that analysis. We'll need someone that who's very comfortable to do all different kind of scenario analysis. Yeah. So another thing, just the last thing I think I haven't heard from your mission statement or from your discussion is, I would like to hear what's the impact of development that's going to, what's the impact of additional developments that are going to have on our stormwater mitigation plan. I think that's important because when we add new development to it, of course, there will be more possibility or more events that were related to significant stormwater runoff and the flooding. So I would like to see the connection between the development and the stormwater mitigation plan. I feel that, and also that if that will give the council the direction, or the planning staff the direction for the future when we're evaluating those new projects, what kind of standards that we need to adopt.
Okay. Karen, and then Ty. Oh, okay.
Right, thanks. I'll be quick. I just want to kind of say, this work is really important. I think this group is really important, but I was a little bit concerned about the scope. I think similar to what Michael was saying, just that I would just encourage us to really keep it focused. We identified a problem and an issue that we want to get a different take on, and that's really important. And I know that will take time, and we want to give it the right amount of time. But I also worry a little bit from the scope, sort of how it. At what point does it duplicate the Stormwater Board and what they're doing? I think we need to be really careful about carving it out as a very specific time-bound piece of work, because we don't want to duplicate. I also do agree. I think it'll be more, not only is it, I think Michael identified a lot of reasons to have the staff really sort of engaged as partners, but I also think from an efficiency standpoint, I know both John and Pamela, you both serve on advisory boards or have, and I don't think we want to have the same structure. This is not the same as an advisory board where staff is just there to kind of, not just because it's a lot of work, but to support the work of the community. And it sounds like that's kind of the structure that you're heading towards. And I think in this case that we envision something different. I don't know if there's a way to think differently about, having a staff co-chair or some other role to really reinforce that it's a partnership that, as Michael said, our staff are bringing their own expertise, experience with the town, knowledge of regulations, what the state will and won't let us do, all of those things. So if the board comes up with a report and then we have to spend months having the staff review it to say, well, we can't do that, we can't do this, it's going to take even longer. So having them be, equal partners in thinking through this, I think will be both beneficial for the solutions and also make it a faster process. So I think those are really my comments on that. So thank you for your work. I know it's a lot of work.
Pamela is on the Stormwater Board, as is Chad Pickens and Chugong Wang. So we have 3 Stormwater Board members. John Morris serves on the OWASA Board. So that's also a nice cross connection there too. All right, Ty, did you have your hand up? I'm sorry.
Yeah, can y'all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, gotcha. I was gonna just say what Karen just said. I also want to just echo that. I think this is different from our traditional, advisory board, and I think staff are full working members of the working group and just want to make sure that that is happening.
Okay. Amy, did you have something else to share? Yeah.
I do. Yeah. I mean, I think that staff is extremely engaged in all of these conversations and is sharing their expertise at the table. So Lauren, you can chime in too, but I think so far the group with its different elements has been working very successfully together and working in partnership. I know that the group relies heavily on staff's expertise, their understanding of things on the ground, their understanding of regulations. So I think I hear your concerns, but so far as things are going and as the group is coalescing, I think that is working successfully. To speak to the issue of looking at stormwater management in Chapel Hill, I think that by focusing in tightly on this one area, they're going to find best practices that we then can expand and recommend to use elsewhere. So I think this is, there's no reason to do this kind of thing on a watershed by watershed basis. I think these best practices will apply to lots of different things. So, and my only comment for the group again is just that I do want to make sure that as we look, we're not just looking at existing conditions, but we're also considering what the likely impacts of climate change are and kind of doing forward looking as we're starting to make our plans. So, but I think the group has actually made great progress. They've had 2 meetings, which is hardly enough time to get organized. Michael, you'll know that. And they've done a very good and very efficient job. So I think that they will get to a place that's very beneficial for the town.
Alan?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the willingness of the working group members to tackle what is, a challenging issue. So first off, my appreciation. I did have a couple of questions, just kind of logistical. So one is, what are the regular meeting times of the working group? Is there a regular meeting time?
Guided by Samantha, we started out setting our meetings on Monday. And so we're still talking about what frequency of meetings we want to have. We're thinking maybe every 3 weeks. We need to leave enough time to develop a meaningful agenda before the next meeting. But we're flying the airplane as we're building it. So, we're just getting started. We're making it up as we go along.
Got it. I can appreciate that. I would encourage, as soon as we're able to settle on regular meeting times, because part of the process, I know, and you all are invested in this, is making sure that there are opportunities for the public to tune in and to pay attention, to inform, maybe to varying extents, the discussion. So, but I can appreciate, the start of things and trying to get things settled down. And then was also wondering about, one thing that's always important to me with any kind of town board or advisory group is making sure that folks in diverse demographics are aware and welcome to view, join at appropriate times the discussion. Just wondering about, you're thinking about that, about, how to make sure that you're getting voices from across the board in our community.
I'll just share a couple of things, Alan. I was very purposeful in making sure there was diverse perspectives on the board from across the community. And we had a couple of people who were not assigned onto the board to actually act as communicators back out into the community. And so we can make sure that they are reaching diverse populations as well. We brought on Louis Rivers specifically because he teaches environmental justice and has a perspective. And he's also, as you know, part of our planning commission and part of the Northside neighborhood, and has a keen interest in this topic, and making sure that we represent diverse voices and perspectives and consider environmental justice in our mission. And there are several other members who offer different kinds of perspectives along with their different kinds of expertises. So I'm excited that this group is not talking just about one creek. They're talking about overall stormwater and equity and those kinds of things as well. So I'm hopeful that that will continue.
Gotcha. No, I appreciate that. What I was meaning more about, and I understand the demographics of the membership, that's good. I was actually thinking more about, community members who are not members of this working group. I'm thinking of folks in places like, Southeast East, public housing, which is in a low-lying area. That's where my thinking is more on. So I think it's important to try to purposefully and intentionally draw on people from these communities.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. Should I wrap us up here? Okay. Again, I want to say thank you. You got moving quickly. We tried to appoint it quickly so we could, while people were very involved and paying close attention, get started with other ideas and other outcomes that would be possible for our community. So I look forward to hearing as you explore all those opportunities out there. And I'm hoping the staff will figure out who your champion or connect person is to figure that out for you, to answer that need as well. We are excited about things you may discover. I'm not as familiar with all of the Durham green infrastructure, but I have been on the mayor's tour in Kansas City when they did their green infrastructure, and then up in Richmond, where they actually use a combination, both in Kansas City and in Richmond, of street calming devices and rain garden type green infrastructure into the street to slow down traffic They took cul-de-sacs and hollowed out the center core of cul-de-sacs and planted green infrastructure there, tree and greenery, to really reduce their impervious surface, but also to, slow it down, soak it up and spread it out. And there were a lot of good examples. And if you can go on a field trip or you can get the information and data from those communities who've already implemented those kinds of green infrastructure things, I think that would be very helpful for our community. And we do have people's attention. So I think it's a great opportunity to pursue things like disconnect your downspout, things like that, which I know are not going to solve the problem, but they will help reduce the problem. And raise awareness. So I think there's an opportunity here to do some steps before you come back with your final report of those kinds of things, why we have the community's attention on these things. So I think it's great. Okay. Well, I hope you'll stick around and listen to the next topic, which are there other questions we need to answer for you? Okay.
Yes, I'd like to say thank you very much. Those comments about involving the community are heard very clearly. That was actually some very strong points that were made by members of our committee to make sure that was in our mission statement. And one of the last public comments we got in our last meeting was exactly what you're saying, that there's a lot of energy in the community and to try to find other ways to really engage all of these people who are so aware now of these projects and are interested in doing something, even if it's not directly related to these. So thank you very much.
Yeah, great. Well, we're continuing our stormwater discussion on our next item here. We're going to get information from our stormwater team on possible changes to our stormwater regulations. All right, who is presenting for us here? Ms. Newman, are you doing?
Yes, hi, it's me, Mary Beth.
Welcome.
I'm in presentation mode.
Looks good.
Great. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Mary Beth Newman. I'm an engineer with the town's Stormwater Management Division. Thank you for having me. During this presentation, I'll review the town's stormwater regulations in the context of climate change. This presentation is 12 slides and will run about 15 minutes. The purpose of this presentation is to provide a preliminary response to a petition council submitted in June. The petition requested a comprehensive review of town stormwater regulations considering the impacts of climate change. Council requested the review be completed and recommendations provided within 18 months. Today's presentation seeks to provide answers to the following questions. What is urban stormwater runoff and how does the town regulate it? To note, we'll be focusing on stormwater regulations that apply to new development and redevelopment projects. How will climate change impact stormwater management goals and regulations? And what are possible next steps for a comprehensive review and report? Staff will propose a technical study in this presentation, and we're requesting council feedback on the proposed scope and approach. What is stormwater runoff and what causes it in urbanizing communities such as Chapel Hill? When it rains, water falls on the landscape and either soaks into the ground, evaporates into the atmosphere, or flows off the surface as runoff. In natural land cover settings, only a small portion of rainfall becomes runoff, as you can see in this graphic developed by the EPA. When land is developed, the natural systems that used up that rainfall are replaced with impervious surfaces such as pavement and rooftops. Less of the rainfall can soak into the ground or be taken up by plants, so more of it becomes surface runoff. The impacts of development on stormwater runoff include surface water pollution, which occurs when pollutants from the human environment are transported by runoff to streams and other natural water bodies. Flooding, which occurs when streams, ditches, and stormwater infrastructure, such as pipes, become overwhelmed by the increased volume of runoff. And erosion, which occurs when the runoff flows quickly off smooth surfaces like pavement and is concentrated into piped or channelized systems. To mitigate these impacts, state and local governments have developed regulations that require development projects to manage increased runoff before it leaves their property. The town's stormwater management regulations can be found in the Land Use Management Ordinance Section 5.4. These regulations apply to new development projects and redevelopment projects for which a zoning compliance permit is required. There are exemptions for individual single-family and two-family lots that are not part of a larger common plan of development. Projects that are subject to the regulations must demonstrate that the proposed development will comply with specific performance criteria. The first criteria is mainly targeted at pollutant removal or water quality treatment, requiring removal of 85% of total suspended solids from the runoff generated by built upon areas for the 1-inch rainfall depth. The objective of the next criteria is to control the peak volumetric flow rate of runoff so that it does not exceed the pre-development rate. This must be evaluated for the 1-year, 2-year, and 25-year storm events. The next criteria requires projects to infiltrate or reuse the increased runoff volume generated by the 2-year, 24-hour rain event. When that's not practical, the town allows the project to slowly release the volume over 2 to 5 days. Lastly, the town does not allow disturbance of ephemeral streams without demonstration of the necessity for the disturbance. The regulatory authority column on the table is intended to show that the water quality treatment criteria is required by the state, whereas the other 3 are local regulations that go beyond the minimum state standards. Each criteria has its own primary performance objective, but they all generally help mitigate pollution, flooding, and erosion. LUMO states that the performance criteria shall be met by using integrated management practices / best management practices using 1 or more approved design options in the town design manual. The approved practices are what professionals in North Carolina now refer to as stormwater control measures, or SCMs. Unless the design engineer can demonstrate that the proposed project will create no significant change to existing hydrology, a stormwater control measure is generally necessary to meet the state and town performance criteria. The regulations require the property owner record an operations and maintenance plan and record a permanent access easement to ensure perpetual functionality of all the SCMs. And the ordinance also states that low impact design options are encouraged. So what are stormwater control measures, or SCMs? SCMs are engineered devices that remove pollutants, control flow rate, and or reduce the volume of runoff from new impervious areas on development sites. They must be designed to meet the state and town performance criteria that you saw on the last slide, and they must be appropriately selected for each project based on site conditions and proposed land uses. In order to continue to function over time, SCMs must be maintained by the responsible party per the recorded operations and maintenance plan. The town's design manual categorizes SCMs by the following primary benefits they provide. Diffuse flow SCMs convey stormwater as shallow, unconcentrated flow at low velocities. They include vegetated filter strips and level spreaders. These SCMs do not provide the required pollutant removal and therefore must be used in series with other SCMs. Infiltration SCMs help some portion of the stormwater runoff re-enter the groundwater system, thereby reducing the overall volume of stormwater runoff. These include bioretention cells and permeable pavements, among others. It's important to note that many SCMs under this category can be modified if the native soils are not able to infiltrate runoff at an acceptable rate, and the modified devices don't reduce the overall volume of stormwater runoff as much as true infiltration SCMs. Detention, retention, and reuse SCMs temporarily store stormwater runoff. Detention and retention facilities slowly release the stored volume, while reuse facilities repurpose the stored runoff for irrigation or gray water plumbing. These can include wet ponds or rainwater cisterns. The petition asks for the stormwater regulations review to assess whether the approved stormwater management methods include green infrastructure and low impact design options. Low impact design is an approach to land development that works with nature to manage stormwater as close as the source as possible, and is generally used as a site or project scale tool. Structural practices can double as SCMs and meet the stormwater regulations if they're designed by the state and town engineering standards. All of the structural practices listed here are acceptable SCMs. Non-structural practices include strategies that generally reduce impact to the natural land features and receiving water bodies and reduce the size of structural practices required to meet stormwater regulations. Low impact design can be thought of as a subset of green infrastructure, which refers to an integrated system of natural elements and LID practices that provide broad environmental benefits, often used as a planning tool at the community or watershed scale. Green infrastructure includes the network of natural spaces within a community or watershed, which can be conserved or restored to mitigate air pollution, urban heat islands, and flooding, to sequester carbon, and to preserve natural habitat functions. Green infrastructure also includes green stormwater infrastructure, a term which is sometimes used interchangeably with low impact design practices, as they're both engineered systems used to treat and control stormwater runoff. Green infrastructure also includes non-engineered strategies to green urban spaces, such as building green streets or increasing open space and tree canopy, which provide multiple environmental and public health benefits. In summary, many structural LID or green infrastructure practices can be used to meet stormwater regulations, but they must be designed per the town and state engineering requirements. And while not all SCMs that are allowed by the state and town would necessarily be considered LID or GI practices, they could be integrated into an LID or GI approach for development. So the town must at a minimum enforce the state water quality performance criteria and design standards, but there are also state laws that limit how local governments implement stormwater regulations. Session Law 2018-145 prohibits local governments from requiring stormwater controls for existing impervious areas. The town can only require redevelopment projects to provide stormwater control for new impervious areas. Session Law 2013-395 prohibits local governments from implementing nutrient reduction rules that are intended to reduce pollution from new developments in the Jordan Lake watershed. The state budget bill currently under consideration includes multiple changes to 160D that would limit local government authority. One of the proposed changes will prohibit local governments from implementing stormwater regulations that exceed state requirements, which may effectively eliminate local regulations that are intended to prevent flooding and erosion. It's important to be talking about stormwater management right now because the associated risks and priorities could shift due to climate change. Council members who submitted the subject petition cited takeaways from the 2020 North Carolina Climate Science Report as a basis for reevaluating the town's stormwater management regulations. These are some of the general conclusions that the report made for the Piedmont region. Temperatures are generally expected to increase. The report noted that the annual average temperature could increase by 2 to 10 degrees by the end of the century, with the lower range of 2 to 6 degrees seeming more likely. The number of very hot days is likely to increase. The number of very warm nights is very likely to increase. And these changes could exacerbate things like urban heat island effect and harmful algae blooms. When it comes to rainfall and drought, the report notes that there are a wide range of potential outcomes from drier to wetter conditions. The wide range of outcomes results from running multiple models based on different underlying assumptions. The report does conclude, though, that wetter conditions are more likely with increased annual rainfall and risk of extreme weather events. But it also predicts more frequent and severe droughts are likely due to increased temperatures. Stormwater control measures, storm drains, and storm inlets are designed based on historical rainfall data, which specifies expected frequency, depth, and duration of rainfall. If this historical data does not accurately reflect the present or near future, it needs to be updated to ensure that engineered systems will perform as designed. Cumulative impact of temperature and rainfall changes must be considered to determine what development and stormwater management solutions will be most resilient in the future. And as the climate and associated risks change, SCM goals and design standards will need to be revised, and stormwater capital projects may need to be reprioritized or accelerated. In the petition, council asked staff to evaluate whether the objectives of the town's stormwater management regulations are valid considering impacts of climate change. The purpose and objectives of our local stormwater regulations can be found in LUMO 5.4.1. The objectives were based off of the EPA's template for municipal stormwater regulations. They include minimizing increases in stormwater runoff, pollution, and total volume of runoff, among other standard urban stormwater management goals. The objectives are still very much valid, but they could be revised to more clearly reflect current town priorities. The LUMO rewrite and the new climate action and response plan provide opportunities here. While the objectives help clarify the purpose and intent of the regulations, they're not enforceable, so it's important to have very specific and clear requirements to help ensure those objectives can be achieved. In general, both the objectives and requirements could benefit from more precise language. Town staff compiled some possible changes that could be made to the town's stormwater regulations. These changes are generally organized from lowest anticipated effort and/or cost to highest from left to right. Some of the simpler changes could be adjusting the precipitation values or water quality volume, which would add a factor of safety to designs, or updating terminology in LUMO and the design manual to clarify requirements. More comprehensive changes could include developing customized stormwater performance criteria based on subwatershed or zoning district, reviewing other ordinances that have stormwater implications, or determining how to incentivize gray plumbing for stormwater reuse. All of these ideas would need to be evaluated for feasibility, relative benefit, and associated costs for stakeholders. To evaluate these and other possible changes, staff recommends council pursue a technical study supported by the resources of a qualified consultant. Tasks for the study could include reviewing existing relevant town plans and studies, reaching out to neighboring communities and academic institutions to understand how others are approaching this issue, coordinating internally with the LUMO rewrite process and green infrastructure initiatives, engaging town residents and other stakeholders such as stormwater professionals who work on projects in town, and developing an evaluation approach so that potential solutions could be scored based on agreed upon values. The deliverables would include recommended revisions to LUMO 5.4 and the design manual with a report of associated costs as requested in the petition. Stormwater staff are requesting feedback from council on whether the proposed scope and approach of the technical study lines up with council's interests. If the proposed scope of the study is acceptable, staff will bring a resolution for formal council adoption at an upcoming meeting. Staff have explored a few options for obtaining consulting services for the study. It's our understanding that a standalone study to review and revise stormwater ordinances could cost around $100,000. So we've looked for opportunities to partner with other town efforts, keeping in mind that council has requested the report to be completed by the end of 2022. Colleen Wilger, our planning director, suggested pursuing this as a technical study under the LUMO rewrite contract. Stormwater regulations are part of LUMO, and coordination with other town ordinances is important. Since the timeline for the completion of LUMO rewrite is further out, we've discussed a blended approach of identifying changes that could be implemented in the short term, as well as changes that may need further coordination with the rest of LUMO. Planning is expecting responses to their RFP in the coming weeks. And in reviewing the responses, we can determine if a consultant with appropriate expertise can be obtained under the LUMO contract. John Richardson, our sustainability officer, has also suggested coordinating this task with the development of a green infrastructure ordinance under the Climate Action and Response Plan. $25,000 has been allotted to developing this ordinance by the end of 2022. And this could potentially be an add-on or a subset of the stormwater regulations reviewed, depending on what types of green infrastructure are of interest to council. If the expertise of LUMO consultants isn't appropriate for this study, we would need to determine another funding source to hire an independent consultant. So tonight, we'd also like council's feedback about the ideas of coordinating with other town projects. And if that's agreeable, then we could try to provide an update on that coordination by next month's meeting. If a council approves of the study moving forward and a funding source is solidified, staff will obtain a consultant and provide preliminary progress in early 2022 with the goal of providing recommendations by the end of the year. Now I'd like to open up to questions and feedback about the proposed study. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. You can give us back the full screen. Great. Council members, Amy, then Jess.
So your first question was, should we move forward? Yes, enthusiastically. I think your plan is great. I love the possible changes to the stormwater regulations, that diagram that you gave, just to kind of show us the range of things that you might be considering. So thank you a lot for that. One of the questions I have as we fold into this and kind of leading off of our previous conversation is, so right now we're looking at how to mitigate stormwater, and we're trying to figure out how, how basins or whatever the system is that we're going to be doing on a big town-wide scale. And when we do this study, I think one of the things we have to look at, it's all of these studies have been predicated on full build out in town. And the way our LUMO works right now, we don't distinguish with any kind of granularity different sorts of pieces of property or areas that could be contributing more or less to flooding. Right. So I think, you can do 70% in somewhere that's just cascading water into an already stressed system, or 70% in an area that's handling it just fine and has lots of capacity. So I think as we move forward, I'd really like part of the report to maybe see what we can do in the LUMO to make more sense of that, because, I see us trying to we're developing and creating more stormwater, and then we're spending a lot of money mitigating stormwater. We need to get those two conversations talking together to figure out how they actually interact and where that development is really important. And we need to do that. And we'll handle the stormwater or other places where development in a certain place might not be in the best interest of the town and might produce outsized negative effects. So just if we can, as we move through this, and we can look with more granularity, I think that would be great. And at one of your earlier slides, you talked about the RCDs and those kind of corridors. I'm especially interested in protecting those. Right now, we strongly identify the RCDs, but for instance, in the upland zone, you can do a 40% intrusion. As far as I know, you can log an RCD without a problem, which kind of then produces all sorts of environmental issues. So as part of this, I'd like to look at those RCD regs and see what we can do about strengthening those. As the town needs to get denser, we need to put more things in town, but I think that we need to couple that with protecting certain things. And I think the stream corridors are right at the top of that list of the things we need to do a better job in protecting. And my last comment is I'm glad you're looking at other communities. I know that Raleigh has a green stormwater ordinance that they put in that I think one of our community members helped write. So I'd be very interested to see more about that. But thank you for your effort. Thank you for moving forward on this quickly. It's a really important topic. So we appreciate your efforts.
Great. Jess, then Michael, then Alan, then Karen.
Yeah, thank you, Mary Beth. I thought that was a really clear, helpful presentation that gave some really good options. So thank you very much for putting that into a format that a non stormwater person could understand. So I appreciate that. I won't repeat what Amy said, but I think those are all really important points. I also am wondering if there's a way. So yes, please do move forward. And I'm certainly supportive of trying to figure out if there's a way to integrate this into an already funded project. I also don't want necessarily to wait several years for the LUMO rewrite, but it sounds, so if there's a way to kind of include this in something that's happening, but still do it in a timely fashion, I think that would be obviously the best of both worlds. But I think just if you could, I guess, come back to us with what you find now that assuming you get the go ahead from council, to just come back and let us know what the options are and how long it would take and what it would cost. I think that would be really helpful. The other thing that I think would be helpful, assuming this goes forward, is some way of having whatever the ordinance is be kind of sensitive to continuing change, so that we don't have to kind of reinvent the wheel. It's grim, but assuming that climate change will get worse, thinking about how we can make updates to this, that there's some, I guess, equation that we could use, or some way where we could revisit this and be able to somewhat easily update it based on changing environmental conditions. Just, I know it's not that easy, but just having a way that it could be updated on a regular basis without having to kind of redo the entire study, or if that's possible. I think that would be really helpful, but that is, I'm not even sure if that's possible, but I'd be, if there's a way to make updating it more easy than it is right now, I think that would be great too. Thanks.
I'll just throw in, we do have a stormwater fee fund. So we do have options for funding that don't require general fund, but yeah. All right, Michael, then Alan, then Karen, then Hung Bin. There we go.
So yeah, I want to thank the stormwater staff for moving so quickly on this and really giving the deep thought that you've clearly have. It was really helpful to me seeing all this, and I've picked up over the years bits and pieces, but seeing it all in one place is really helpful. So thank you. I obviously, or maybe not obviously, strongly support moving forward as quickly and as intensively as possible. And in that regard, I was interested when you sort of talked about the costs of doing this, and I was actually struck by how much lower they were than I would have thought they would be. So I just want to make sure that we don't try to do this on the cheap, that we, this is really important. Stormwater is, perhaps, certainly in the top 2 or 3 issues that we're always dealing with on council. So, let's make sure that we do it right. I think that's really critical here. Whether we can do it, using the same consultant or the same contract that we do for the LUMO rewrite, or we have to do a separate contract. I mean, whatever it takes to make sure we do this really well, I think is really important. Building on something Jess said, I know we've done this for certain other things where we've moved things out of the LUMO and put them into, policies or design manuals. So, I'm wondering if one of the things that could be looked at is in fact moving some of these things out of the LUMO so that as things change, town staff can relatively easily update them to take advantages of changes in technology, or we discover that our projections about extreme weather or whatever were wrong. But rather than always having to sort of do a big project, make it into something that can become a living and breathing document that is responsive to both changes in the external environment as well as changing conditions within Chapel Hill. So I think, that, and again, that may just not be feasible. Maybe if it's moved out of LUMO, then it doesn't bind projects. But I think to the extent that we can do that, I think it's proven helpful in certain other areas that we, where we've moved things out of LUMO or the budget ordinance. We can now change parking fees, to take a ridiculously simple example, without having to come back to council every time. So I think there may be some options there, but full speed ahead. Thank you for all this work, and I really look forward to seeing where this goes.
Okay, Alan, then Karen, then Hong Bin.
Yep, I'm also in agreement about going full steam ahead on the technical report. And I appreciate the scope that it has. I like that it would include looking at some historical information. I think it's fair to expect that this historical information might even include past town regulations on stormwater. I'm kind of curious about that aspect of things, and if there have been times when the towns had maybe even stricter regulations or what, but that's just something I'm curious about. But I did have a question. So let's see, with respect to the, sorry, lost track of my question here. So the regulations and enforcement, I'm just curious, presently, how are our stormwater regulations enforced?
So during the development review process, when there's a new project coming on board, the applicant has to submit a stormwater report that's signed and sealed by a professional engineer, and then the construction plans have to correspond with that report. And it shows that they are achieving, or their proposed design will be able to achieve those performance criteria that are in LUMO 5.4. And staff reviews that and confirms that their design assumptions are reasonable, and that it matches up with our design manuals and the state's design manual requirements. And then when construction begins, the staff coordinate with the project to make sure the expectations for construction are understood, and that the expectations for completing the construction of those stormwater control measures is understood. And then towards the end of the construction process, the stormwater control measures will have to be inspected by town staff, and the design engineer has to provide documentation showing that the stormwater control measures were built according to the proposed design. And if they weren't, or if there's some variation, then they have to provide a revised report showing that what they have constructed will still meet the regulations, or else they have to make changes to get there. And then at that point, the town will, once they've gotten that approval then the project is considered closeout. Part of that closeout process also includes the operations and maintenance agreement that has to be signed by the property owner, and that transfers with the property. So any future property owners have that responsibility of maintaining that stormwater control measure. And the operations and maintenance plan has requirements for regular maintenance and inspections. In the past couple years, actually, Alicia on our staff developed a really great set of standardized operations and maintenance plan documentation to make it really clear what the expectations are for that maintenance activity. And that also now includes an annual inspection that has to be conducted by a qualified professional. And that's either an engineer or an architect that has the appropriate expertise and training. And Alicia also created, or not created, but really has ramped up our stormwater control measure database so that we're really keeping track of making sure people are submitting annual reports, following up on projects, and generally trying to work with people to make sure that their measures are in compliance and being maintained.
Gotcha. Thank you. That was very thorough.
Yeah, I don't know if that was in generally what you were looking for, but.
No, that was great. Thank you. So a follow-up question. I'm wondering what happens if an annual report isn't submitted?
If an annual report isn't submitted, staff have been working on sending out reminder letters and following up with property owners. There's a lot of education that goes along with that. And this is something that communities all over the place are dealing with, is property owners that may or may not really understand what these things involve. And so we have made a lot of efforts and headway on educating people. And in general, we try to work with people because it costs money to get these things done. And so unless there's a life safety issue, which in most cases there's not, then we generally try to work with people and get like a agreed upon timeline for maintenance and stuff like that together. And we also do identify people that are repeat offenders basically in our database.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, Karen, then Hong Ben, then Ty, didn't know you wanted to join me.
I'll just echo the thanks you've already heard for this work, and definitely agree with moving forward with the technical study. Just a couple of points. As someone who responds to RFPs in my day job, I'm wary of trying to add to the scope of an RFP that's already gone out. That sounds like kind of wishful thinking that we'll have a unicorn applicant. So I want to make sure we're planning for that not to be the case. Can add on just seems like a distinct set of expertise and skills. So I guess we've already touched on this, but just want to emphasize the need to, even if this does end up being a separate contractor, consultant, just emphasizing that need to work together with the climate plan, green infrastructure work, and the LUMO and the flume goals. And, we just had this housing study. So making sure that we're not kind of having siloed kind of approach of like, this is what we need to do without thinking about the other goals we have as a town and what we're hearing about our housing needs and those kinds of things, so that they're speaking to each other and kind of maximizing sort of the opportunity and what am I trying to say? The opportunity and the ways that they can work together, the synergies, I guess, to use an overused word, but just thinking about how when we write the scope that's making sure that's clearly put forward in the scope as part of this work. Does that make sense? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Hong Ben, then Ty.
Yeah, well, I think for your question of whether or not we'll go ahead with the technical study, it's again, I echo all the other council members. It's a enthusiastic yes. I think we need this, and everyone have been telling us we need this. So so I think for the issues that you just mentioned, and also the standards that we're having now, I think so. One of it, of course, I understand that those modelings is based on like their design storms, like 1 year design storm, 2 year, their design storms. So those design storms, they're just a hypothetical storm that what we think would be appropriate. So how do you evaluate that given the current status of climate change and the more intense storms that are coming? How do we evaluate those design storms, whether or not they're appropriate? Or should we use different assumptions for those design storms?
Yeah, staff attended several meetings and webinars over the summer and the fall, because there's actually the timing of this petition really matched up with the acceleration of a lot of different professional presentations on these issues. And so other communities and academic institutions and stuff are starting to think about solutions to these problems. And one of the main things that people have been talking about is rainfall data, because the standard is using the NOAA rainfall data that's published on their website. And Bill Hunt with NC State Bioag Engineering Department presented on the fact that it seems like that data is probably not accurate anymore. And he had some suggestions for interim potential changes, because there are people who are working on updating that data, but it takes a long time, and it may not be for a few more years until that actually is available and published. So there were some suggestions that we included in that short list of potential changes to the regulations. So we definitely would want to consider some of those things, and it includes either adding a factor of safety to the rainfall, to the water quality storm event, or using the upper end of the confidence interval for the NOAA rainfall depths, because currently most people use the middle range, basically.
Right. Okay, well, that's great. Well, I really I think that's very important that everyone, what I hear from a lot of people in that area talking about, we need to update that assumptions about the design water. And then about this, I mean, from the projects that we reviewed in the earlier this year, I think, so there is this question about whether those assumptions about the current, because a lot of our town's standards, well, especially when you're doing a peak flow control, is based on the current condition, what's current. So the question that, well, I actually from reviewing those projects, I think there's a big, it's not that clear what the current situation is, right? So I think, is there, from what I have seen, a lot of them are using the maps that has been published, and lots of them do not have the resolution. It's not site specific. It's like Orange County or the Chapel Hill large area, just assume it's clay. So those kind of assumptions, is there anything that we can do more specific, like for this site, given the locations, or maybe we require them to do some like taking some samples from the site and to do something more specific, or say the ground cover, the ground cover with a lot of like fallen trees, and then versus, just instead of making very general assumptions about like open field, is there those kind of things that we can regulate as well? That what assumption they should or should not make?
I think that those are kind of detailed assumptions that could be fleshed out as part of clarifying design manual requirements and design requirements that have to do with like, what are those underlying assumptions?
Right.
So those are things we can could potentially explore as part of the study. just making sure that they are in line with accounting for climate change and real site conditions.
Yeah, so if there are some comments in the technical study to address that issue, I think that'd be very helpful. And then there are lots of studies that, I mean, especially in the summer, those extreme flooding situations that people talking about the resilience, like every community need to have a resilience plan. So is it possible that when we're evaluating the stormwater stormwater control measures, can we add a section or include some evaluation about what if some extreme weathers that come or storms that come, what kind of impact it's going to have? Because I think that's related to if this site is situated on a site that's have significant impact on the neighboring communities. If the scenario in extreme weather condition is very serious, then the council should know what kind of impact that could be. Of course, it's a disaster kind of scenario. It could be like happen at a low probability, but the council at least need to have understanding of what kind of that disastrous situation is going to be and how significant it's going to impact the communities. It could be like the site that does not have that kind of sensitivity or significant impacts. Then I think the level of planning might be appropriate. But if the site is very sensitive or have significant impact on the neighboring communities, then I think that is something that the council needs to know when it's making those entitlement decisions.
Thank you. Ty, did you have anything? Okay. I think you're hearing from all of us to go full speed ahead. I wrote down you got a yes for the moving on the technical report and coming back to us with an update about the scope and all the things that you need to share with us. Is there anything else you need from us? Because I think you've heard quite a bit.
I think, sorry, I'm looking back through my notes. I guess we will, if there seems like general support for it, we'll continue to coordinate with planning and John Richardson on potential partnerships there. And hopefully, once we understand more what the expertise of consultants for the LUMO rewrite looks like, we can understand whether that actually looks like a feasible venue, because I think one of the council members commented on just making sure that whoever works on this really has the appropriate expertise. I guess one of the questions is kind of around whether council is open to somewhat of a staged approach where in order to get some things done by the end of 2022 or recommendations made, if there's a possibility for maybe things that are more realistic for the short term to be implemented, but then other things identified that may more be appropriately coordinated with LUMO, because there's like zoning implications and of these stormwater regulations.
I think you're seeing a lot of shaking of heads. They'd like to go ahead and do that. I also heard consideration for doing this as a completely separate project with the LUMO rewrite in mind, but to move faster with the technical expertise in this particular subject, like we've taken other things out of the LUMO and formed them into being the technical document that the LUMO refers to. So I think there's a way to move more swiftly on this than the LUMO rewrite is going to take quite a while. But we keep that in mind, but I think you're hearing from council that we want to move expeditiously on the stormwater technical document. Okay, well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
We do have a few moments for public comment. If there's anyone wishing to comment from the public, you can use the raise your hand function, or if you're on via phone, the *9. Is there anyone wishing to share comments with us at this point?
I am not seeing anybody. Now, if forever hold. Oh, wait, we have one. We have Mr. Robert Beasley wishing to speak with us.
Okay, we can move him over.
We can manage that. Okay.
Hi, just a quick comment. I was going to type it in the chat, but I think that recommendation to move the technical requirements outside of the LUMO and just have it refer to it is a great idea.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. It's interesting. I've been on the county commission when we do it the other way. We had all these individual technical documents. We put them all back together in a UDO. Now I see the town, and I think those are just kind of the ebb and flow of things. And as you figure them out, and I do see us needing this because it's such an important issue that's happening very quickly. I think I see it as a separate technical document that it's pointed to by the LUMO so that we can have.
Yeah, it would give you a lot of flexibility to be able to move quickly should things change in the future, especially given the climate change pressures. So that is a good idea, I think.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing. All right, anyone else from the public wishing to speak?
Nope.
All right, then we need a motion to, thank you, Mary Beth. We need a motion to move into closed session, please. And you have a separate link in your account, and you'll have to wait for me to get there before I get started. So I have the last one off here. Okay, Mr. Parker, can you read us the motion to go into closed session, please?
I move that the council go into closed session as authorized by General Statute 143-318.11A6 to discuss a personnel matter, and as authorized by General Statute 143-318.11A3 to protect the attorney-client privilege. At the conclusion of the closed session, the council will adopt a single motion to end the closed session and adjourn the meeting without taking further action.
Okay.
I need a roll. It's been moved by Mr. Parker, second by Ms. Anderson. I need a roll call vote, please. Mr. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Anderson.
Aye.
Mr. Boynton.
Aye.
Ms. Gu.
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen. Ms. Ryan.
Aye.
Ms. Stegman.
Aye.
And the mayor says aye as well. See you in closed session. Thank you, everyone. Markeith, good job. Thank you very much. I will leave you guys since there's no more council members on. Thank you.